Hello and welcome to Merlin's Manor. Today I'm giving my thoughts on Legacy of You, which is a solo game published by Garphil Games and designed by Shem Phillips. The game has elements of worker placement, chaining, and hand management with multi-use cards. It may seem like it also contains a bit of deck building, but it's more like deck maxing as you are attempting to get a bunch of cards into your deck, because the quicker your deck has to be reshuffled, the quicker you can potentially lose the game due to the flood. The game is also a campaign game where you'll be playing between 7 and 13 games, playing to either 7 wins or 7 losses. After each game, you will reveal a card based on whether you won or you lost, which will lead you to a piece of story, which will add something to the game. If you win, then you will add something to make the game a little harder, and if you lose, you'll be adding something to make the game a little easier, so the game has an element of self-balancing, in an attempt to keep the game challenging throughout the campaign, but not overly challenging. Before I get into my thoughts on the game, I'm going to start out with a brief gameplay overview. In this game, you are trying to build out a canal before the floodwaters advance to flood the town. The game is set up with 6 townfolk cards that are available for purchase and 1 barbarian to fight. You start with a deck of 10 townsfolk cards, and each day you'll start with a harvest where you get the benefits listed here. Plus, once you've unlocked different farms, you can get each of these benefits as well. And you have the option of tucking a card, which would give you this red meeple if this was tucked at the beginning of each round. This one would give you a brick and one of these little shells here. And so as you build out more of those, you'll be able to do that even more. But you cannot tuck here until you've unlocked this building and so on and so forth. And so you'll be unlocking more spots to tuck cards once you pay the resources to build these green huts as shown here. You would build a hut there, and then you would reveal this for a benefit, and you now have a worker placement spot plus another place that you can build one of those there for future better harvests. Each round you'll get 4 cards to your hand. You can use these cards to get the benefit in the brown section here, or you can discard the card completely to get the benefit both in the brown and the red section. Or, as I mentioned earlier, you can tuck cards to get ongoing benefits even though you won't get a benefit for it that round. If you were to get it for the brown benefit, it would go right here and you'd get it in future turns when you reshuffled. You can purchase townsfolk from the card row above, which will go to your discard pile when you purchase them, or you can pay the resources to immediately get what's on the top brown part, but then they come over here instead. The cost and provisions to acquire the townsfolk are down here, as well as the cost to fight the barbarian in provisions, as well as with fighting the barbarian, you'll have to pay these meeple resources in order to fight. And you'll get the benefit listed over here, which in this case is a story. That's a story as well. This one would be 3 shells if you defeated that one. Now, if you ever have 7 barbarians out across this entire area here, you immediately lose the game. So you're going to be wanting to fight those barbarians for a couple of reasons. 1, to keep that from happening, and 2, at the end of the round, you're either going to have to discard a card or a resource in order to handle each of the ones that are out here. So if we had a few of these guys out here still at the end of the round, like this, then you would have to pay either 3 cards or a couple cards and a provision, or a red meeple, white meeple, a provision, or whatever, in order to satisfy those people. And you don't want to lose too many cards, because if you ever run out of cards here, you reshuffle, and this moves forward, and you haven't built that canal space yet, then you would automatically lose the game. And so you want to keep as many cards in your deck as possible to keep that from happening. Now, building the canal, which you pay the resources up here, will get you these resources, plus you'd have to discard a card here, and then you unlock a trading space that you can then use to, say, turn 2 of these into a provision. As you unlock each one, you're going to be getting this one to discard a card in order to get 2 of those. When you unlock that one, you get that. But keep in mind also, as you go along, every time you unlock one of these, you're going to be bringing out an extra barbarian each round. At the beginning, you're just bringing 1 out a round. Here, you're going to start bringing out 2 out a round. Once you get here, it's 3, and here at the end, you're going to have 4 to deal with at the end of the game. So that is the gist of the game. It is a race against the floodwaters as you are building out your canal. You are also fighting against barbarians to avoid being overrun and having to pay resources or running out of cards in your deck. As you play, there will be some cards that will have you stop and read some story text and take certain actions, often adding cards to the game either immediately or for future games. You also add things at the end of each game based on whether you win or lose, and the goal of the campaign is to win 7 games before you lose 7 games, with the addition of cards changing the game up a bit each time. Now let's get into the game review. Starting with the art and components, I really like the art and components. You have your standard wooden meeples and other wooden pieces as well as some cardboard components. The cards are pretty standard. I found it was a nice touch that they were cards that go on the board with a place to add your huts, and then once you pay the resources listed on the card, you place your hut and gain a resource for where you placed it, and then you remove the card to reveal a new worker placement location. Canal cards work in a similar way, revealing a new trade opportunity when you pay the resources listed on the card to build the canal section. And the trade and other icons that will be unlocked are listed underneath where the cards sit, so you can know what will be revealed. The artwork on the cards has a very similar style as to the other Shem Phillips games like Raiders of Scythia. Most of the iconography is very clear as to what you do. The board looks great. There is a nice insert which holds all the components in their own tray and has space for each type of card and a place to store cards that have been cut from the game and story cards that you'll be adding to the game. The cards are numbered on the bottom, making them easy to find and easy to separate in order to reset the game. Also, cards that are added via stories that may need you to reference back to the story they came from also have a gold number on them to remind you which story they came from so that you can go back and look that up if you need to. A nice touch is the back of the rulebook, which provides all of the icons and what they mean, and a 5-step order of phases in each round with space for you to place the boat when you build out your canal, so you can then remember to return the boat back to the board during step 3. From an art and components perspective, this is a very nice game. Now let's get into ease of play. It is not hard to learn how to play this game, and the rulebook is very well written. The storybook walks you through extra additions as well. The icons on the board are easy to understand, and there is help from the back of the rulebook for quick reference. So it all is very easy to get into and learn how to play this game. Now, as far as the gameplay goes, this game has been very fun to play. I enjoy the multi-use cards. Mostly you will use them in one of 2 ways, either for tucking them up to 5 cards to gain benefits each harvest, or for gaining the resources in the brown section of the card. But if you find yourself in a tough spot, you can discard them to the townsfolk discard pile that is out of your personal deck in order to get an added benefit. You also have the decision space when paying for a card as to whether you want to add the card to your discard pile to get shuffled into your deck to use later, but you get no immediate benefit, or discarding the card in order to get an immediate benefit but not adding to your cards for later benefits. Typically, you're going to want to add the cards to your deck for a delayed benefit because you also need cards to be in your deck to delay the flood waters. The cards will also benefit you multiple times, generally from being in your deck over a one-time benefit if you use their ability immediately. There's a huge element of building an engine and comboing in this game, and the comboing was a lot of fun and felt similar to the combos that you unlock in Hadrian's Wall. As you defeat this barbarian, you get these which allow you to do this, and so on and so forth. I really enjoyed the combos in this game. You're not solely relying on cards to give you all or most of what you are going to be using, but rather you're unlocking harvest benefits by building these farms and unlocking worker placement spots and more opportunities to tuck your cards by building those green huts, and unlocking the ability to consider meeples as the same color as other meeples by building your purple buildings. You also unlock more trade opportunities as you build out your canal. So as you go, you're getting more and more that you can do on your turn, which is necessary because more barbarians are going to be coming out as you progress, and the cost to build the canal is going to be increasing as well. You definitely want to be careful on how fast you build the canal, because while you don't want to be too slow and have the flood overtake you and cause you to lose the game that way, you also don't want to build out over the new barbarian draw spaces before you're ready to handle them. Timing is key here, and I found that very interesting aspect of the game as well. Ultimately, winning this game comes down to planning, proper building out of an engine, proper resource management, and taking advantage of trades, and being mindful of the barbarians and balancing fighting the barbarians with sometimes taking damage or bribing them rather than doing things that are too wasteful of your card resources just to handle them and take them out this round. Sometimes you just need to completely get rid of a card for its extra resource or buy a card from the row for its immediate benefit. But often putting this off and taking some momentary hit is better. And then do you let the barbarian damage you and lose a card? Or do you pay a resource or a worker to appease the barbarian? I would not say that I felt the game felt incredibly varied from game to game. There were a few things the game added that gave you something extra to focus on, but most of what was added was simply to make the game a little bit harder or a little bit easier to win. Overall, I enjoyed this game. While I did get destroyed in my first game, and something that was added to one of the games later on also caused me to be playing from behind most of the game and eventually lose via the barbarians after finishing the canal in that other game, I will say that once I figured out the strategy after that first game, I did find the game became super easy to win with the things the game threw at me to make it harder, with the exception of that one addition, which I'm not going to speak of as to what it did in order to avoid spoilers. Now, as far as the theme goes, I found the theme of this one enjoyable, and the gameplay fit well with the theme. You are building this canal as a flood is coming. As you get more cards, which represent people helping in the project, you can get more done each time period before the waters have time to advance because you have more people helping with the cause. And that's what that building up of that deck represents, more people working towards the cause. And each person has their own personal area of ability, bringing in resources for building, or they're a person who can work, or they're a person who can fight. And you've got these barbarians who are hindering your progress as they attack you, causing you to have to send people off to fight them. And if you don't, they're going to attack and kill your people, hindering your efforts to get the canal built before the waters reach the next area. The theme also comes out in a fairly basic but well-written storyline with some interesting twists and turns. I wouldn't say the storyline is the most riveting storyline, but it does move the game along and provides a narrative for what is going on, so you're doing more than just playing out the same game over and over again. The storyline also fits with what is being added to the game in the form of various cards and tasks that need to be done. Now let's talk about replayability. Replayability is what really lowers my score for this game. From my initial single campaign play of this game, I would be likely to rate this game probably an entire point higher if I felt it had more legs to it. The cards themselves come out in a different order each time, but you see all of the cards in every game, with exception of ones that get added or taken away, of course. I didn't find which cards came up when to be as of much importance as just focusing on building practically the same engine every time with a few minor variations depending on what came out. Once I learned the system, I found it to be a bit of a rinse and repeat and not that difficult to win, even when the game made things harder. I also found the benefits received from losing overall were way stronger than the added trouble that you would face for winning. As far as the campaign story goes, if you win most or all of your battles every time, you're going to experience all or most of the story that you are going to face in future playthroughs. There are not many branching storylines. The only story that you're going to miss are from the win or loss cards that you didn't reveal in that first playthrough, and maybe a few tiny blurbs based on your win or loss record, plus the blurbs from the alternate loss conditions, whether you lost by the flood or by the barbarians. If you get to the point where you are winning 100% of your games, then you're not going to be unlocking any more story in your playthroughs. And even with a high win-to-loss ratio, you will not unlock much more very quickly. I may play through this one more time to get a higher record. My first playthrough of the campaign yielded 7 wins and 2 losses. I did hear there was a promo for making the game a little harder. I still do not know if this would add too much for me in the way of replayability, as even a more difficult game would still feel a little samey in the actual gameplay itself, and the 3 tweaks seem only minor in how they would change that actual gameplay. Now let's get into my final thoughts. While I did enjoy this game in my single playthrough of the campaign, which took me 9 games, the game takes a pretty big hit from replayability that I perceive that I will get from this game. Not sure if I even want to dedicate the time for a second playthrough, because it was already starting to feel a bit samey by the end of my first playthrough. All that being said, I rate this game a 7.5 out of 10. It is a good game. Initially, I would have given this possibly a 8.5 out of 10, but since it just doesn't have the legs to me, that replayability, it drops down to a 7.5. Still a good game with good art, good components, and interesting gameplay with lots of fun combos in each game. And your mileage may vary on how replayable you find the game. Just for me, it peaked a bit early. I felt like I got most of what I wanted out of a single playthrough of the campaign, which is going to take between 7 and 13 games, as you are either going to get 7 wins or 7 losses to reach the end of the campaign. I hope you've enjoyed this review and it has given you some insight into whether this is a game for you or not. I certainly did enjoy my time with this game, short though it may wind up being. I may do a playthrough of the first game on my channel to give you an idea of how the game plays without spoiling too much. And from there, just personally play through the campaign once more, striving for a 7-0 record, or maybe even a 7-1, as there was that one card that I foresee giving me some trouble yet again. Anyway, I encourage you to check out some of my other videos here. I hope you'll join me for future reviews, playthroughs, top 10 lists, and more. Have a great week, and game on.